welcome to Oakville Matters. This is community television, thanks to Cogeco, that allows everybody in Oakville to talk about and think about the things that really matter to Oakville. And today, we're talking about speeding. And I can tell you as mayor, I hear about speeding quite a lot. And with us today to try to make some sense of it are Jenn Hartman, who's an Oakville resident from the northeast part of town, who's a bit of a community watch volunteer and general neighborhood activist, I'm going to call you. And Jill Stephen, who's a traffic engineer with the town of Oakville, who's going to try to demystify some of the really strange rules that the traffic department, I know that residents find some of the rules that the traffic department puts out a little bit strange. And Sergeant Ryan Snow, and he's the supervisor of the traffic unit at the Halton Regional Police Service, and you could meet him if you're misbehaving. Sergeant Snow or Ryan, can you tell us, I think the top question on everybody's mind is, how fast can I go before you'll stop me?
Well, my recommendation would be to stay within the posted limit. At all times, that's by far the best advice that I can provide.
So it's okay to go under a little bit?
You know what, it is, because quite frankly, there may be a lot of occasions where the posted limit is just too fast. And so we also have that kind of concept of driving within the prevailing conditions, both road conditions and weather conditions. So whether or not the posted limit is 50 or 80, sometimes it's better actually to go slower. You'll be able to reduce traffic collisions involving yourself and others, perhaps also preserve your insurance rates, and at the same time not get yourself into a compromising position.
Oh, every time winter arrives and there's any ice, I see all kinds of people who are slow to remember, oh yeah, you got to slow down on ice.
Well, for sure. And guess what? Snow tires, even in town, highly recommended.
Oh, I'm guilty of not doing that. Jill, how do we decide what speed limit to put?
We look at the characteristics of the road. Is it mainly a residential road? Is it a road that's connecting a residential road out to the larger road network? Look at things like the number of driveways and entrance points, and the width of the road and the number of lanes that it carries.
And how does that tell us what speed to put?
Well, if it's a local road and it's primarily serving residential, so it's the road you take after you get off the main road just to get to your house, then that's going to have a lower speed limit than if it's the road that you take after you've gotten out of the neighborhood area and into that broader network, maybe the regional road network, for example, and its purpose is to connect you from one place to another, and you're not really stopping along the way. That road would have a higher speed limit.
So you come out of a neighborhood where it's 50, and you get onto what I think of as a collector road, and some of them are 50, and are any of them 60?
The town's roads are primarily 50. We do have a couple that are 60, so I think of places like Royal Windsor Drive, for example. There's stretches of Cornwall that are 60, but primarily the town's roads are 50. It's the regional road network and then the provincial road network that have the higher speed limits for the most part.
Okay, and Jen, the complaints that I get two kinds of complaints about speeding actually, and they're diametrically opposed. Okay. And all of you will laugh when I tell you this, but I get calls from people who are at home during the day, and it really seems like any car that goes on their street feels too fast for them, and right. I get a call. And the other complaints, I don't get phone calls about this, but if I go to speak to a service club, the older the population is, the more likely I am to hear, why is the speed limit so low? How much time do you think I have left on the planet? I want to get where I'm going. And I guess that comes back to you in the traffic department and the town and the region and the province. There's a push me, pull me on this speed thing.
Yeah, we hear the same range of responses, and we even surveyed residents about a year and a half ago and found a real split between the folks who wanted to see speed limits lowered right across town and the folks who said, you know what, let's keep them at 50 or where they're at. We need to be able to move to get across town, and so we have a real balancing act that we need to be looking at, as well as we're trying to look at things like appropriate speed limits and traffic calming and how we what recommendations we make for the road network.
I get the same thing on stop signs.
Yes.
People who want to stop speeding want a stop sign, and then you and your colleagues have to stand up and explain stop signs don't actually stop speeding.
That's right, yeah.
Which always confounds people. They just don't believe that. And then same deal, service clubs, and the older they are, it's like, why are there so many stop signs? I'm trying to get somewhere.
Exactly, yeah.
So we've got remarkable. There's a spot on Morrison where somebody wants us to plant a fake cruiser to try to fool people, like a decoy.
You know, it's actually something we have on occasion utilized, which is a decoy, or just basically a parked police vehicle. I've seen them in a number of different places throughout the entire region. They can have a preventative effect on slowing traffic down. However, generally what we find though is that if you do that in a residential community, people will eventually catch on to the fact that it is a decoy car and they'll just ignore it.
Yeah.
I think the one thing you mentioned before though is the idea of speeds. I also supervise the collision reconstruction unit, and part of what we do is our outreach into the community is part of our prevention and social development message toward the community. And the idea of is just even scrubbing off 5 kilometers of speed, slowing down even a marginal amount, can greatly reduce your stopping distance in order to avoid a collision. So there has to be that balance between getting where you're going, but also recognizing just that marginal excess of speed could actually mean the difference between somebody walking away from a potential close quarters situation and somebody who sustained serious bodily injury or death as a result of a collision.
And I think slowing down really, if you look at it, most trips are 5 kilometers in length or less. And so if you take that trip at 60 kilometers an hour, that's going to take you 5 minutes. If you make that trip at 50 kilometers an hour, it's going to take you 6 minutes. That minute, there's a lot you can do so that you don't have to make up that minute.
Yeah. Well, I as mayor, before I became mayor, I don't think I drove all over town like I do as mayor. And what I found when I did before I became mayor was 20, 22, 23 minutes tops was the most it would take me to get from one far point to another. It's sort of, I think of it as a 20, 25 minute town as a result. And no matter what I change my speed at, it's going to be around 20 minutes. So I really don't get the need for speed. But Jen, in your time, you've heard a lot of demands for traffic calming.
Yes.
And Jill, in your time, you've had to, not only have you had to explain that traffic calming is not a panacea, but in my time as mayor, we have gone through at least 2 cases I can think of where the community overwhelmed council with a demand for traffic calming for speed bumps, and within 6, 7, 8 months came back and begged them to take them out. Mm-hmm. And it's not free. It was like $100,000 round trip. One was in northeast Oakville, and one was in northwest Oakville. One gentleman in northwest Oakville, he'll know who he is if he's watching, but no one else will know. He waged a relentless campaign, and he eventually got council to put them in. And the very next thing that happened was his wife told him that if he didn't get rid of him, she would leave him because she hated the noise.
Yeah. So as staff, we've tried to do a couple of things to help with that. One is we use standards, and that makes it more clearly defined when traffic calming would be implemented and when it wouldn't. And that takes some of the feel out of it, some of the ambiguity about should this road actually be traffic calmed, or should we leave it as it is and look at other measures to address issues that might be there. So
from your perspective, you're trying to shift from regulation by feeling into decisions by evidence?
That's right. Where we can, we think that that's a good way to do it. And that's what our colleagues in other municipalities across the province, across Canada, do as well. The other thing we're trying to do, though, is offer more tools for traffic calming. So we've introduced the radar speed display signs. So those are the signs that you can see how fast you're going as you're approaching the sign. And then when we've updated our toolbox as well to include things like curb extensions or bump outs.
Yeah, no, you've got pictures of some of these things,
right,
and Jessica, why don't we pull up? Oh, look, we've got the bump out right there.
That's right there.
People can see that. I was mystified when I saw this for the first time. What is that supposed to do?
Well, what it does is it narrows the road surface. And so if you think you drive primarily based on how comfortable you feel on that roadway. If it's rainy or snowy, as Sergeant Snow was talking about earlier, you're going to slow down. If you feel like you have less space, you're also going to slow down. And so that's what these try to do. The other thing they do is they can help also narrow the crossing distance for pedestrians.
Okay, what else you got in your bag of tricks?
Oh, well, we have the speed cushions, or what most people know of as speed bumps.
All right.
And that's something we
I
started
recognize
with.
those. They're on Maple Grove, I think.
That's right, and we've got them in front of most of the schools in Oakville that are on local roads as well. You need to slow down as you approach and you go over those. But that's a design that we came up with in Oakville so that our emergency service vehicles can go through the center if they need to without damaging their vehicles or without disrupting anybody who might be in the back of an ambulance, for example.
Now I find that these are relatively noise-free.
They can be if you slow down.
But if you don't slow down,
That's
yeah,
right.
okay.
Interesting point, though, you mentioned about these areas where they're around schools. Those are also designated community safety zones in a lot of cases. The fines and the points attached to a ticket both double. So it's an important thing also to recognize is that when the police are out and we actually enforce these areas, one of the common times where you'll see us out en masse is during the Safe Start project, which we do every September. We always do a week of education and then we do a week of enforcement. And in these situations when we're writing a ticket for a community safety zone, generally what you'll find is the people you're writing the tickets to are the people that live in that actual residential community.
Yeah, in the 20-odd years that I've lived here, I've seen over and over again the very people that come out arguing for speed control are the people caught when the speed control goes in. It's really freaky to watch.
The way our communities are designed, you know, people ask me, are people speeding through my neighborhood or are we speeding through our neighborhood? And anecdotally, I think it's us speeding through our neighborhoods.
I would
I can tell you, my neighborhood, absolutely, it's that way because there's no way to go through my neighborhood. And you know, I live on the exit street, and I watch my neighbors zip out in the morning.
Absolutely, and the way our neighborhoods are designed are not such that you are driving through my neighborhood to get to North Oakville.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the way we're designed is this is my community and I drive out of it or I drive into it, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's not really a through traffic neighborhood.
And what speed do you think they're doing when they're zipping out? Would 60 kilometers an hour be reasonable?
You know what? I'm really bad at gauging speed, but I would bet you that it's no more than 60. But 60 feels a lot more than 50.
Well, let me put it to you a different way.
It's 20% more.
It is. 60 kilometers an hour, let's convert that into meters per second. That's 16.6 meters per second. So that's one of the things we do when we're talking with the community. A lot of people, especially younger children, can appreciate what that speed is. It's easier to kind of attach a better idea as to what that in fact means. And
What's the stopping distance at 60?
At 60 kilometers an hour, it's going to probably in the range of about 15 to 16 meters.
Wow.
So this is where we try to explain to people, even if you just a marginal decrease in speed is going to have an exponential increase in your ability to brake. So 16 meters per second is what you're traveling at. So for the average residential neighborhood, you're passing 2 or 3 residences every second when you're traveling at 60 kilometers per hour.
Oh, and they're going right by a bus stop, a school bus stop.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And speed really is sort of a four-headed demon. I mean, it takes you that much longer to identify a potential hazard. It takes you that much longer to then start reacting to the hazard. It takes you longer now because you've prolonged your ability to start stopping your car, and therefore you're increasing your risk of an accident. So it's not just, it's a domino effect, really.
So as people either get or are responsible, they'll get this, and our theory is that they'll change their behavior. And your data shows that there's kind of a clumping around the indicated speed limit, and then there's outliers, right?
That's right, and that's why we use those standards. We can't we can't control all of the outliers, and that's the same if you're designing a storm sewer, if you're designing a roadway. You know, you can't design any infrastructure for every single situation. So we try and focus on that majority.
I have higher expectations than that. I live in Oakville.
You know, it's interesting. I happen to notice here we have a picture of a traffic circle, which
yeah,
is
let's
becoming
talk about
a
those.
significant area of question, is how do you navigate a traffic circle?
Yes, and can we show there? Look at this traffic circle. This is not. We've got 8 or 9 traffic circles in Oakville and a slightly larger number in Halton. And they come in all sizes, including some that are much smaller than this. And we've got one that aggravates me that I'm probably responsible for that is way smaller than this. And we've had several cases where people just drove straight through.
Wow.
And it aggravates the local neighbors. And the neighbors there incorrectly believe that stop signs would solve the speeding on their street. And we've got this, and the exceptions prove that it's a failure. Do you know what I mean? Like,
That's it.
Well, it's still
nobody
scheduled.
notices that normally it works fine, but when somebody does a crazy thing, then the whole thing's wrong.
That's right. Yeah. If they
Yeah.
are used properly, they can be very effective at slowing people down. And you know, with us, if you replace them with a stop sign, people may stop. They may do a rolling stop.
Exactly.
They may not stop. But if they do stop, then they're probably going to accelerate to try and make up that time.
There's a 4-way stop near where I live with a bus stop, and it'll surprise everybody, but I ride the bus sometimes just because I'm responsible for the buses. I should ride it to see. I'm standing at the bus stop watching my neighbors roll right through it. Some don't even roll through. It's like power through a 4-way stop, and like sometimes I'll even smile.
Well, you know, from an enforcement perspective, and I've spent a lot of time on the road writing traffic tickets as much as I have a supervisory aspect to what I do. And I'll get that argument from a motorist who will say to me, well, no, I did stop. And what I'll say is, it's a very, very simple way for me to articulate that you didn't. If your wheels don't come to a full stop, meaning your wheels don't stop rotating, then you haven't stopped. And that's why we actually even teach it at the police college to younger police officers is, your wheels have to stop rotating, even if it's only just for like a microsecond. If you haven't done that, then you have not properly stopped.
I think they call rolling through a California stop.
I've heard that term before. What I call it is $110 and 3 points.
Well, let's go back to the traffic circle picture if we can, because you were going to tell us how to drive through the thing, and it's actually important to do because I meet a lot of people who don't understand how to do it, and we have members of the community with European backgrounds who believe that they're self-evident how to drive, and that's the, nature's way of an intersection would have traffic circles, not stop signs.
Certainly.
And yet we do have people who go, what the heck is this? So explain, how do you do this?
That's where the education component, aside from enforcement and engineering, the education component is a really integral piece of what we do as a team, both the region and the police. So in a situation like what you're looking at here, the most important thing to recognize is that you can enter the traffic circle when it is safe to do so, but you have to yield to anyone that's already in the circle.
That's why you got the yield sign.
That's it. So you have this red van in the photo. If that red van saw another vehicle already in the circle coming around, because again, you're coming around this counterclockwise, in fact, you have to let the individual in the circle have the right of way. What I see, though, both as a police officer on duty and off duty, and it's kind of the bane of my existence, is you'll get that odd courteous driver that will be in the circle that will actually slow and come to a stop and wave, in this case, the red van to carry on. And what happens is it completely clogs up the whole circulation of the circle because then everybody else behind that courteous motorist is now braking, and the whole thing basically falls apart.
I've seen that at the same 4-way stop that I was just talking about near my home. People power through when there's no other traffic and they figure, what's the harm? When people, there's a protocol about who goes first when you simultaneously arrive at a 4-way stop.
Right of way.
Right of way.
Yep.
And I have seen over and over again people go, no, I don't want it, you go.
Yeah.
And I figure that's just as dangerous.
It certainly can be.
We're too polite.
Yeah, the whole concept of right-of-way only works if everyone observes the same convention.
I'm pretty sure we still require you to take a test to get a driver's license.
Well, you know what, we do, and it's interesting because I've actually just had this discussion the last day, is right at the start of the Highway Traffic Act is a very, very clear statement that driving is a privilege and not a right in the province of Ontario. So just because you live here does not mean you have the right to drive here. But right-of-way only works, basically, again, if everyone follows that convention, but more importantly, you have to abide by it. Yeah. Because if two cars enter an intersection close to about the same time, if there's any doubt, car in the right always has the right of way. And we'll actually have T-bone or angle type collisions in intersections where motorists will argue over who had the right of way. And we'll say, tell me, who got there first? Well, we're not sure. Then the driver on the right does. So that's probably the easiest message to get out. Right of way always applies. The only exception is that traffic circle.
So yield to the right.
Yield to the right. That's it.
I think even I can remember a rule like that.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. And at the end of the day, guess what? It's going to save you the grief of being in a collision, possibly getting charged, mechanical repairs, insurance rate increases. So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Follow some of these very simple rules and recommendations, and you'll be able to get where you're going safely.
Now, Jill has another picture of this radar device, and I wonder if we can look at that. Because I have questions about this technology. We've just invested a lot of money in getting, we started out with one of these as a pilot a few years ago, and now I've lost track of how many we have, but I think we've got an equal number for every community in Halton. And how many do we have in Oakville?
We have 12 in Oakville.
12 in Oakville.
So there are the towns plus the resources the police have as well.
And the regions as well, right?
So there's a ton of these now.
Yes, there is.
And I've got to ask, does this slow people down, or do people look at that as a challenge and see if they can move the number? I mean, how does it really work? Because I'm thinking this is a video game era.
I think there's probably a stats part that's probably best answered by the engineers in the crowd. However, from a police perspective, I like the word anecdotally you brought up earlier, is if it slows down some motorists, it's going to have the effect of slowing down the ones following. Oh. So you're never ever going to have that, that silver bullet that's going to slow down everyone, but it will generally have a calming effect. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what we have found.
So if you are concerned about speeding, you need to get out there and aggravate those speeders by getting in front of them.
Well, within certain terms.
Yeah. I mean, we often have requests to lower the speed limit on any given street, and the approach we've taken is that it's not enough just to change the sign. We need to do something else to help people change their behavior. And that can be education, it can be encouragement, it can be enforcement, or it can be engineering. And these signs help people realize how fast they actually are going, and really you don't need to be going that fast. And so we do find that most people do slow down for them.
Well, I know that when we get requests at council for political stop signs and political speed bumps, which is what the traffic department calls requests for these things where the warrants don't justify it. Like, technically it shouldn't go there, but you're going to do it politically anyway. So the staff call those political decisions. I guess they are, aren't they? What people are asking for is a change in behavior, and they're believing that these stop signs or speed bumps or whatever will change behavior.
That's right.
And we've had many cases that we've mentioned already where council didn't believe you until they made the mistake. It took 2 round trips on the speed bumps to get this council into the frame of mind it's in now, which is great. We know you're sure you want speed bumps, but we're trusting our staff now. So you've actually, because of our mistake, you've earned trust.
And it's about expectations too, and that's where those warrants and those rules come in. If you put in a stop sign that isn't warranted or doesn't meet those engineering guidelines or rules, people aren't going to expect that it's there, and therefore they're less likely to follow it. But the people who notice that it's there are going to think that they are safer and think that everybody else is going to stop for it. But you have potential for more of those outliers who don't follow the rules, and then we're maybe putting more people at risk.
Yeah. So, Jenn, you're really in touch with your neighborhood. Have I said anything that contradicts your experience at the neighborhood level around expectations and behaviors and so on?
No, I think, you know, there's an issue within any community where people think there's a quick fix. And I think that's where the phone calls that come into you and to the ward councillors originate from, is this expectation that I can make a phone call and get traffic calming, even though, as Jill said, it might not be warranted. So there's a whole set of tools that can be implemented that some residents aren't aware of that are really useful. And, you know, there's incremental steps that need to be taken before a roundabout is dropped into the middle of a neighborhood. And there are speed studies, and I think you do about 60 or 70 of those each year across the community that need to be carried out to assess whether traffic calming measures are even warranted. There are a few online tools that Halton Police offers in terms of reporting traffic concerns. I think one of them is the Road Watch tool, and I think Sergeant I should defer to him to speak about
No,
this.
I appreciate you bringing that up. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can go online to haltonpolice.ca, and there is an online reporting form there. We also have a reporting form through the Halton Police app, which is both Android and iPhone. The other thing you can do is you can also contact the station or even attend the station in person and speak with one of our district response officers or the district response sergeant that's at the divisional level in Oakville. And they can do a number of things, including sending out a warning letter to the registered owner of the vehicle. They'll assess the concern. They'll look for trends, whether or not deploying officers is appropriate. Our COPS people, which is our citizens on patrol, send them out in order to look at and validate the concern in order to determine how best to deal with it. So there are a number of different ways to be able to address that aside from contacting the mayor and the ward councillors.
So it sounds to me like what we've done, I hope what we've done here today is we've demonstrated, or we've tried to anyway, demonstrate that really the solution is education, and there are no shortcuts in education. And what I've learned over the last 10 years is we have to connect with each other and converse with each other in order to make education happen. And in today's fast-paced me world, that's never going to be a perfect solution, but there may not be any perfect solutions in life. You don't want to call 911 for speeding, but you are encouraged to call 911, by the way, if you see texting or cell phone use. It's a very curious thing. But on the other hand, 90% or 80% of the calls to 911 turn out not to be crime anyway. So do you have any final word on when to use 911?
Most important thing from a policing perspective, if you see someone who you believe is impaired, so perhaps weaving in their lane, not stopping at a red light, impaired operation is what we refer to. If that's a crime in progress, that is definitely an appropriate time to call 911. All
right, well, there you have it. And now we've seen something more on the subject area of what matters to Oakville. And I hope you'll join us again when we do Oakville Matters again.